Good morning and welcome to Backchat. I'm Hugh Chilton, your co-host today is Mike Rouse. Mike, good morning to you.
Good morning, Hugh.
Is all news fake? Post-truth is, according to Oxford Dictionaries, the word of the year. It's defined as relating to circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. So where does that leave the news? Where can we get important information about the world that is reliable and impartial? Is there any harm, for example, in bias in the press, and is it just unavoidable? Does social media make things better by offering non-mainstream sources, or worse, by creating an echo chamber? Does it matter, for example, if the US president-elect offers no evidence for claims of voter fraud? Is that refreshing and an expression of opinion that is his right? Or is there, in fact, nothing new in all of this and no more than the way it's always been? Do you think there's a proper level of scepticism? Email us with your thoughts and comments. Our address, backchat@rthk.hk. Our Facebook page, Backchat on RTHK Radio 3. You can call us on 233-88266. Joining us for our discussion, we have with us now veteran journalist Francis Moriarty, Colin Sparks, who's Chair Professor in the Department of Journalism at the Baptist University, and Tom Grundy, who's Editor-in-Chief of the Hong Kong Free Press, an online news source. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, everybody. Once again, our email address is backchat@rthk.hk. I'm going to put this one to Francis Moriarty first. Francis, is all news fake, and we're just kind of waking up to that fact now?
I don't think all news is fake, but I think we're waking up to the fact that over the last several decades, the pressure for speed has just, and the technological ability to provide that speed has overwhelmed the traditional structure of journalism. That plus the fact that newspapers are generally losing money hand over fist and trying to figure out a way to survive. And so I think these pressures all have come, but I think the roots go way back. I mean, I'm such an antediluvian figure in this profession that I can remember when newspapers were produced with lead type, and there was something called a composing room, and a stone was a real stone, and all of these layers that were between the reporter and actually getting published were there to not only get the job done, but many layers to spot possible error. Or I remember getting a call very apologetically one day from somebody down in the composing room who said, I don't want to interfere, but is this Miss So-and-so in the paper, the sister-in-law of the mayor? And I went, I don't know. Let me look into that. And, of course, it changed the entire story because I simply didn't know that this person had that relationship. So there were all these layers of checking that a reporter's story went through. Now the reporter's story just goes straight out there. There's almost no shortstop to look it over to assure accuracy. And I picked up an ad the other day here in Hong Kong for a position, very responsible position when you look at the list of responsibilities, someplace a mix of being assignment editor and a managing editor in a traditional news environment, and responsible for accuracy and fact-checking under timely conditions and, blah, blah, blah. And the minimum requirement for the job was at least 2 years' experience. Now, nobody, the greatest prodigy in journalism, is going to have 2 years' experience and be able to perform at the level of an ME. So I think these are issues that are affecting everything.
And what was the salary offered, Francis?
The salary wasn't listed in the position, but I think it should pay reasonably well. But I find that in our profession today, there's some places that pay salaries that are astronomical by my standard. But at the same time, there's many, many more places that are offering salaries that are the level of 20 or 30 years ago, certainly if you're a freelancer.
So, I mean, you're saying you agree that journalism standards have slipped?
Yeah, well, of course they have. Obviously they have. There's no way that our profession could withstand the withering attack that we've had just on an economic basis alone, never mind the political attacks that have come on. I think when newspapers and television began to be collectively known as the media, a lot of problems started. And I would say two other things I'll throw out there and for discussion are that I think salaries for reporters in many places became too damn high for a period of time. Journalism was never a profession you went into to become rich unless you were maybe already wealthy and you were a publisher. You just didn't. It was a profession where you aspired to be middle class, and that's to say have enough food on the table, pay the mortgage, and dream of your kid going to college. That would be the ultimate aim for most people. And then we had the all the president's men phenomenon. And suddenly journalism became a sexy profession where you could topple a government and get things done. And it was Hollywood. And a lot of people went into the profession, not necessarily for all the right reasons. And gotcha journalism began. So I think that this combination of allure and money at certain newspapers, it was not spread throughout the profession, that's for sure, changed the nature. And people began socializing with their sources, something that was extremely frowned upon when I entered journalism, but has now become common practice. And this kind of interplay between the people you're covering and journalists, I think, is in some respects extremely unhealthy. So this ego satisfaction, the driving of journalism with names, where you don't say it's the 6 o'clock news with Dan Rather or whatever, it's Amanpour or it's whoever you want to put up there. The personality has become the product that's driving the story. It's not the story that's driving the news.
So you think there was a time when there was more accuracy, there was more objectivity?
I don't mix these words up, Hugh. I think objectivity is something that exists kind of as a myth.
Yeah.
I think that fairness exists, and I think that you can try to recognize your own prejudices and try to get them out of a story. And be as neutral as you possibly can be, and be balanced over time. It doesn't mean that every single story has to be like 2 corks on the water. It just means that over time, say, in covering a campaign, when you look at the balance of all the stories that you do, there will be a balance for all the candidates that might be running in that race. That's what I say. And you had people, when I started on a sports desk as a 17-year-old, you had an edit. You had somebody above you who was a skilled sports writer. He would look at your copy, and then it would go to the sports editor, and the sports editor would look at it. The editor would pass it to the copy desk. Somebody on the copy desk would look at it. The copy desk editor would send it to the slot. The slot would take a look at it, and then it would go downstairs to the printers on the stone, where not only could the printers cast an eye over it, which they would sometimes do, but you had an editor whose job was to go down on the stone, be sure that everything looked the way it was supposed to. They pulled a proof, that is to lay down a piece of paper with ink and pull off a copy, and then they read the proof for anything that had slipped the eye in the process. Nothing like that exists now. And I'm sure Tom Grundy will tell us in a few minutes he wishes he could have some of those layers, because right now what's happening in journalism is the editor, the reporter is the editor, is the proofer, is the slot, is the person who puts the story up. And I just think all those layers have gone.
All right. Professor Sparks, good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. A friend, this is a discussion about news, but it's not just news, is it? This whole idea of post-truth applies to the news and applies to the media and applies to social media, which is kind of halfway between a personal opinion and a public medium. And it also applies to the politicians and the political world. And people are saying that in the last presidential campaign, there was a lot of lying. There were a lot of half-truths and so on. As I say, this applies equally to the media and to the politicians. Do you see it like that, or is it not?
Well, first of all, I think that what Mr. Moriarty said is basically correct, that there has been a huge economic crisis. All sorts of jobs that used to exist in the newspaper industry in particular have been stripped out. You can pick up a copy of a serious newspaper like the Financial Times and find glaring spelling mistakes on the front page, which is pretty horrifying to someone who's supposed to train people not to do that sort of thing. But I think that the issue about post-truth is much deeper and much broader than the mass media. I think it's to do with the way in which basically the advanced societies are run. The fact that the majority of the population are fairly convinced that inside the Beltway or in the Westminster Village or whatever the Berlin equivalent is, that there's a conversation going on between people who are highly educated, well rewarded and very powerful, who conduct this conversation without any reference to the needs and interests of ordinary people. And I think that the the great irony is that someone like Farage, a former stockbroker or something, and Trump, a property speculator, can pretend that they're outside this elite and can muster support around that. That I think it's that that populist atmosphere which allows these things to flourish.
So people feel that they have been lied to. Is that where the truth element comes in?
I think that people think that no, they think correctly that necessarily all representations of the world are selective. No journalist can be objective. Journalists have to select, they have to interpret, they have to frame, they have to shape things. I think the feeling generally is that that the elite media in particular, because I think that there is a difference between, let's say, what the Guardian or the Financial Times or the Daily Telegraph would say in Britain and what the Daily Mail would say in Britain. I think that people feel that the way that people talk and the way that people are addressing each other is so remote from them that someone who seems to cut through that, whether they're speaking the truth or telling lies, has an audience.
No, that's you brought in a very important point from the presidential election that we've just witnessed, that people were being confronted with facts to prove that a candidate had told a monstrous untruth, and were basically shrugging and saying, I don't care. What does that tell us about the public demand for truth?
Well, in British terms, you'd say that Hillary was one of them and Donald Trump, amazingly, was one of us. Yes? And that you listen to what we say and you don't listen to what they say. I think it's, the American election is a very clear case of the fact that, that the ultimate insider is not believed, not credible, whereas someone who masquerades as an outsider appears to be credible, whatever he says.
I think a lot of people don't want to be informed; they want to be affirmed.
Now we're in the territory of Fox News now, aren't we? Of people tuning in to a channel because it's saying the sorts of things that they feel, rather than what necessarily are truthful or accurate.
Well, I think there's an element of human nature there, isn't there? I mean, if something accords with how you generally see things or how you would like to see things, it's going to be more palatable than if somebody says, the reality is this and you're going to have to live with it.
This touches on the one of the central questions, which is that the New York Times and Fox News and The Guardian are no longer the central mechanisms by which people, particularly young people, get information. They get them via Facebook, and Facebook gives you what you want. I like dogs, and I get lots of pictures of dogs. If I like cats, I'd get lots of pictures of cats. If I like Trump, I'd get lots of speeches by Trump. It's the selective nature of the information, the news, or whatever, the lies that are fed you from the Facebook algorithm or whatever other system.
Interestingly,
that's causing the problem.
Interestingly, Facebook is itself getting feedback on some of this. I mean, people don't, when they first started using Facebook, names of people you hadn't seen in years were popping up on your screen. You were reconnecting with people. Now they've changed the algorithm so that you get you're kind of in a silo. In a channel, and only the people that are in that channel are showing up on your list. So you end up seeing smaller and smaller numbers of people instead of having a growth in the number of contacts that you have. So you can have a gazillion friends, but you're only seeing 12 day to day moving on your page.
All right. Well, also joining us, as I mentioned, is Tom Grundy from the Hong Kong Free Press. Mr. Grundy, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hi. Thank you much indeed for joining us. Post-truth. Does it mean anything to you?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of issues there and a lot of things I agree with. I think a lot of different parties are responsible for this as well, and things like Brexit and Trump, which has been based on a lot of falsehoods of what's been happening. But for years, I've seen what a website looks like from behind the scenes, and through tools like Google Analytics, we can see what people click on, and we can see, what they comment on, and there's a huge difference between what they say they want and what they're actually interacting with. And as was just said, it's natural for us, it's something about human nature, to gravitate towards sensation, towards new things, particularly things that elicit a reaction. Outrage, more than any other topic, gets eyeballs on social media. And we know when we do a story that if it affirms the worldview of our readers have to keep those things able to check more. Otherwise, we would just clerks and interacting, with about cats or Chinese tourists on the rampage or wild boars, in Central, because it's bad for democracy. You need an informed electorate. So, only last week we did a story about Edward Leung, a localist, apologising for his role in the oath-taking row, whilst at the same time calling Hong Kongers pigs. And one of our readers really objected to our angle on that, but we can't change the facts or tailor the news in the way that we're used to, Facebook doing. I think we've got used to having our music, predicted by Spotify, our shopping tailored by Amazon. Netflix tells us what movies we like, but it is a rather dangerous spectre when we have search engines, let alone Facebook, tailoring results to our worldview.
But other than relying on your professionalism, Tom, what's the cure for this?
Well, everyone needs to take some responsibility here. Facebook should be acting. They need to admit, that they do have editorial oversight, whether it's done by machines, robots, or people who made them, or people. We can see that the decisions they make sometimes are journalistic. They're editorial, like the Napalm Girl, which they had a week-long crisis over, taking it down, putting it back up. Had they have got a team of professional journalists there, they would have been able to have make better decisions. Likewise, when there's an election on, maybe Facebook should be presenting everybody with a selection of 10 news or video pieces that are relevant that day, regardless of the algorithm. Maybe you should be able to, turn the algorithm on and off and just see a more Twitter-like, time-based news feed. Readers themselves, should be checking these things out and caring about the facts. The media should be debunking it, and we see them try to, and there's some specialist websites for it. And as Francis focused on, we should all be investing in, public media and ensuring that we can shore up the resources of news media to actually get out there and understand what's happening.
That brings us to your free press, of course. I mean, you coming out with an accurate story 2 hours after someone has broken it inaccurately. Do you feel that pressure, presumably, every day to be quick as well?
Yeah, we do feel the pressure, and the rewards are very high when you're quick. We will act more like a newswire, and we will only put out 1 or 2 lines as news breaks until we know more, and we'll continue to keep it updated. That's how we balance speed with accuracy. If we get too caught up with just hitting publish, we're going to make mistakes. But I don't think you can point to any of our stories and see any huge, factual glaring errors. We've been pretty careful with it all. I think what Francis said about objectivity and fairness is certainly what rules for us as well. There is no such thing as objectivity. There are human beings who are writing these things. You can never, consciously remove all of your biases from stories, but it's not the case, as Francis says, that, our reporters are fact-checking and hitting publish. We do have at least, 1, sometimes 2 layers of editorial oversight, but luckily we've had no major crises. I think once for 10 minutes we had a story that Hillary Clinton was coming to Hong Kong as opposed to running a fundraiser. And that was because several of us misread the press release. But other than that, we've been pretty careful, I think.
Where would you recommend people get their news about the world? Because we want to learn what goes on in our society and in other societies. How do we do that?
Don't tell anyone, but South China Morning Post. It may be unexpected I would say that, but I think people should go to our competitors, to the SCMP, to Hong Kong Free Press, to the Standard and RTHK. Make sure you're getting a diversity of views. Also, we haven't really defined what we mean by fake news, because you have total hoaxes, which is what prompted this debate we've been having in the last few weeks after the Trump election, where someone in Eastern Europe has been literally making stuff up and it's been going viral. Then you get hyper-partisan and misleading information, which is sort of designed for you. And I think in the Chinese press there is a lot of different titles, but so many of them are vehemently towards one side of pro-Beijing. And then you get more difficult sort of hybrids of facts and fiction, and then you get satire and parody. So if we have some news literacy and we understand the difference between these, and if we do a bit of checking and we just stop before we click share, we can have a bit of awareness of what kind of news we're reading. I recall last year two pieces that went viral in Hong Kong. One was about North Korean brothels, another was about a horrible substance served up in a Hong Kong bar, and they were both completely fake. But I had my own friends who I respect being pretty intelligent, sharing these as facts. But if you look closely, if you do things like reverse image searching, if you Google the story to see if anyone else is picking up on it, if you have an awareness as you're reading the story, how is it attributed? I mean, everything we write, we will ensure the reader knows where that information has come from. Even if you're just looking at the domain name and the quality of the website and when it was established, you can get some sense of the quality of your news. But I think the number one advice is to just make sure you're getting your news from a variety of sources.
Okay, yeah, there is a kind of subgenre of fake news about fakes, actually, which is quite interesting. Like the fake egg story, that was a complete fake story in China, and I think you get stories about fake rice and things like this. But Colin Sparks, is that the way to do it then? Is to just go to lots of different places?
Well, I think that's a good strategy for coping. I don't think it solves.
But then do you just
problem.
hear lots of lies? You just hear lots of a variety of lies.
I don't think it solves the problem. I mean, I think you can always go to the Hong Kong Free Press and get the truth.
Amen.
Very well subbed as well, I must say. I think the real problem is generating the stuff. Who is going to produce high-quality news and who is going to pay for it? Traditionally, indirectly, it was the advertiser. They're no longer interested for newspapers. Traditionally, in television in Western Europe and in radio in Western Europe, it was the taxpayer indirectly through the license fee or whatever. And that's politically more and more difficult. It seems to me that as economic pressures mount on any news organisation, the fact is that finding the money to pay people to check the facts, finding people to pay people to dig out the stories becomes more and more difficult. And no matter how carefully you read the news, the question is, what are you reading? And the economic basis is eroding every day.
In the Brexit,
people are very. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
In the Brexit debate, buses were touring the country with the slogan, "We send £350 million a week to Brussels. Let's use the money for the National Health Service instead." But that wasn't true. And nobody seems to have been held to account for that. In fact, there's even a picture of a quote from someone saying, "We never said that."
Nigel Farage.
With a picture of him standing next to the bus.
Yeah, that was politicians, not journalists.
Yes,
to be fair.
They weren't, this was a lot of he said, she said journalism during Brexit and often during Trump, where you're just giving two different sides and they both may be wrong, but you were meant to intervene and present the facts. But it was also debated in Britain that we don't want to hear from experts anymore. So it's mad. In Hong Kong, we've had lawmakers talk about fake refugees without any evidence of the sort, and we've had CY, say that there's foreign forces that occupy. So we try and call it out when we see it, but as you were saying, it takes resources, it takes money, and people are used to free news. There's no way we could put up a paywall, and SCMP, took theirs down a year ago. There's just so many other places you can go for news, so it'd be mad to charge. But Hong Kong Free Press didn't happen any earlier, because for years I was watching from the sidelines, having initially studied this topic, 10 years ago, wondering when the funding model would sort itself out. And, we've watched things like sponsorship, advertorials, online ads, events, micro donations, crowdfunding. None of them are the magic bullet, and it's very tough. And there's cutbacks everywhere. There are newspapers that have fired all their photojournalists. Certainly, we're a small team, and we have to. Each team member has to do photo, video, and copy. But it's still expensive. If you want investigative journalism, you've seen the film, Spotlight. It takes a lot of time and resources, and I'm just grateful that we're able to continue with fundraising at the moment. We have things like FactWire, and the solution we have is mostly crowdfunding. Is the public stepping up and convincing them that there's an importance in this to support us.
Okay, well, we're going to break for the news now at 9 o'clock and continue later in the programme, by the way. We're going to be talking about Donald Trump's chats about Taiwan, talking to Tsai Ing-wen, to the president, was it the president on Taiwan? I think that's right, president on Taiwan, rather than the president of Taiwan is the correct protocol, I think, and the implications of that.
Because you can have a president of a professional body, can't you? And nobody gets agitated. President of the engineers or something.
Yeah, don't talk about agitation. Okay, the weather forecast, mainly cloudy with haze. Cool in the morning and dry during the day in the next couple of days. 23 degrees now, humidity 82%. Welcome back. This is Backchat on a Monday morning. We're talking this morning about fake news and non-fake news. Oxford Dictionary said that post-truth was the word of the year. Is that a word or is that two words?
Hyphenated.
That's debatable, I guess. I suppose Oxford Dictionaries should know. Well, mulling over the role of the media, we have this Tom Grundy, who's editor-in-chief of Hong Kong Free Press, the website, Colin Sparks, who's chair professor in the Department of Journalism at the Baptist University, and veteran journalist Francis Moriarty. Our email address, once again, backchat@rthk.hk. Our telephone number is 233-88266, and our Facebook page is Backchat on RTHK Radio 3. Later, we're going to be talking about Donald Trump's chats with Taiwan. What's going on there? Was it a mistake or was it part of a change of strategy? Once again, you can email your thoughts, your analysis, backchat@rthk.hk. We'd like to hear from you. Okay, we've got a caller on the line now, I think. Mr. Tang. Mr. Tang, good morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hi, your views?
I think there are two reasons for the prevalence of social media as a source of information. Because, first of all, Hong Kong people are always on the go, so they have no time to read newspapers or verify the facts of certain stories. It is their daily routine to use the newsfeed function on social media like Twitter or Facebook in order to keep their fingers on the pulse of the latest current affairs. So to keep abreast of the developments on different incidents, they go to social media where they can have the most recent information at their fingertips and discuss with peers what's happening in town. Bombarded with a mind-boggling amount of information every day, they can only be selective when deciding which media to look at, and in this case, they look at the social media. And another reason is people, especially the young people here in Hong Kong, don't trust the mainstream media because many media outlets may have their own hidden agenda. Some may be espousing the ideologies of certain interest groups or political parties. Others may be the mouthpieces of the government.
Okay, Mr. Tang, you see, yes. this is what I don't understand. If they don't trust the mainstream media because it's biased, then why do they go to a more biased source? Or do they just go to a different biased source? They just accept that everything is biased?
I guess there is just a level of distrust in the mainstream media, so they just want to find out the truth by themselves, by digging up stories, and they somehow believe that social media would provide a platform for them to get to the bottom of the stories.
So it's kind of the digging. It's finding it's by doing what they think of as research. They think that they're finding a hidden truth. Is that kind of the point?
Yeah, because I think people are, in general, very cynical of the things that they read in the mainstream media. So they just maybe they just can count on themselves to find out the truth.
And so it's kind of comparable to the way that people will go for non-politicians because people feel that politicians, like mainstream media, are tainted. So you want somebody who's in a way outside that, whether it's Duterte or whether it's Trump or whoever, perhaps.
Yeah. So but people just have the habit of going to the social media because they just believe that seeing is believing, and this old saying just rings true in this digital age. But I think if they rely too much on social media, they may run the risk of being brainwashed or acting on impulse, or rather than rationality and jumping to conclusions. Because a case in point is in 2014, I think it was Passion Times who published a story about the possible passing of Internet Article 23, which was not true, and somehow two youngsters were jailed as a result because they smashed the glass near the electrical entrance. And so sometimes it's a risky thing to do, to trust everything you see on social media.
Can I ask, where do you get your news? Where do you find out what's happening?
I sometimes refer to the mainstream media, and then other times I would look at social media, because I believe that you cannot trust everything you read or you see on either media. So the best thing you can do is to gather as much information as you can, so that you can make a decision about what to trust and distinguish between facts and fiction.
Right. You seem to be in the same ballpark as Tom Grundy, then, that people should go for a variety of sources and then kind of have an amateurish cross-checking, but at least it's better than nothing.
Yeah,
which is what people did when newspapers were cheap enough and they're plentiful, and people would read multiple newspapers, particularly in Chinese societies. And I know that in San Francisco, where I lived, there were all kinds of newspapers in Chinese, and people would read as many of them as they could to figure out what they thought was probably, they knew the inclinations of the different media, and in the end they would balance it all out and come to something that for them approximated what was going on. And but now it's a very different situation. The whole marketplace has changed.
Okay, Mr. Tang, many thanks for your call.
Okay,
thank you very much. Number 233-88266. Okay, on Facebook, Rod says, Backchat posts on Facebook too. Does that make you a fake news source? I'm sure the main media outlets would like not to have competition, and I'm sure they would like to be able to manipulate opinion like they used to. Sure, there is a lot more noise now, but that's what comes with freedom. That comes from Rod. Francis, do you agree with that?
I think you have many more voices out there, many more voices to choose from, and I think that's true. But in a sense, when I say this, listen through, there's no such thing as a free press, because in the end somebody has to pay, and that price can be many different ways. But you have to at some point support something if you want it to exist. Otherwise, all you're going to have is people who have a lot of spare time on their hands sitting in a little dim room someplace, putting up whatever strikes them as funny, interesting, provocative, or maybe they can sell it, because we now know there are people who've made a lot of money selling fake news. So that's what you'll end up with if you don't make a choice on some sort of medium that you rely on. But the question is, do people feel that they need news media in order to make their decisions and to come to opinions about things? And it may be we're in a period of time where people figure, no, I'll pick up enough from here, there, and everywhere to make the decisions that I need to make in my own life.
Okay, here's an email from Bowen. Thank you, Bowen, who says, Dear Backchat, I would suggest that you should not be too concerned with the so-called word of the year. It's likely to be just a vogue word, that's supposed truth. Neither should you be too bothered by the impact of the social media. As Chris Patton pointed out in his conversation with Steve Vines in The Pulse, the social media and the internet should not be allowed to undermine journalism's pursuit of the truth. A quick review of the definition and history of the concept of post-truth indicates that it is certainly not new, and its practitioners have been predominantly governments and politicians who understandably want to manipulate public opinion and discourse to foment support for their policy objectives. Journalists are the moderators and, more importantly, the natural guardians of the process of dissemination of information and public discourse. Looked at from this angle, the journalists have to a considerable extent their work cut out for them. For journalists like Bill Kovac and Tom Rosenthal, the responsibilities of journalism are pretty clear. In their multiple award-winning book, The Elements of Journalism, they asked, what is journalism for? And provided this answer, quote, the primary purpose of journalism is to provide citizens with the information they need to be free and self-governing, unquote. It has to be stated that both of these distinguished gentlemen are journalists in a democratic country, the United States of America. Thus, they are able to proclaim the following to be among the principles that journalists are generally agreed upon. Journalism's first loyalty is to citizens. Its practitioners must maintain an independence from those they cover. It must serve as an independent monitor of power, and its practitioners have an obligation to exercise their personal conscience. The remaining principles, according to Kovacs and Rosenthal, are the technical disciplines of verification, providing a forum for public criticism and compromise, striving to make the significant interesting and relevant, and keeping the news comprehensive and in proportion. Obviously, not all journalists, not even those in their country, can always fully observe these principles. But at least if these principles are generally accepted by journalists to be their responsibilities, their tasks are bound to be much clearer and easier to delineate. That comes from Bowen. Bowen, thank you very much indeed for that. Colin Sparks, maybe you're more familiar with the British kind of tradition, but they're kind of quite... I get the feeling quite divergent views in America and the UK, for example, on what journalists are for, and that the very kind of high-minded rhetoric you hear there about a duty to citizens is not one you'd find necessarily in every country.
Well, I think that it is high-minded. I think that it existed in the US for a considerable period of time, perhaps still does exist for historical reasons. I think that the situation in Britain has always been different. The situation in most European countries is different. That newspaper journalism in particular is much more competitive business in London or in Paris or Berlin, and newspapers are aiming not at every reader, but a selected group of readers. So, if you're some kind of liberal, you're going to look at The Guardian, and if you're some kind of conservative, you're going to look at the Daily Telegraph or the Mail or whatever. And so I think that that relationship with the audience has been different in the UK. I think that in America, yes, a newspaper like the New York Times, which had virtually no competitors within its trouble to work area, was able to see itself as serving citizens. I don't think the Daily Mail, or I don't think the Guardian see themselves as serving citizens. They're serving part of the audience, part of the citizens, ones with fairly well-known, they know how they vote. So it's unlikely that the Daily Mail will support a leftist cause, and it's unlikely the Guardian will support a rightist cause, because they have a very clear idea of what their audience are.
Rather troubling analysis. I suspect it's right. That's what's troubling about it.
Is the answer better support for me, for RTHK, for public media, because we do serve citizens?
National Public Radio in the United States now has the largest audience figure that it's ever had. Now, a lot of people would see NPR as the quintessential voice of the liberal left in America, but it still has record numbers. And it's interesting that in Hong Kong, on any survey of media that's been done that I know of, the news outlet with the highest ratings of public satisfaction and credibility is RTHK, which is owned by the government.
Yes, but that
it's an interesting...
can be a slippery slope, can't it? Being owned by a government that keeps its hands off the broadcaster is one thing. Being owned by a government who sees the broadcaster as their publicity machine, as happens not too far away from here, is something else.
The state-run news media, like Russia Today, and then there's public media like NPR or the BBC, and you have to have mechanisms in there to ensure that they're able to operate independently. But Francis is right. The CUHK poll they put out each year, we're not included yet, but RTHK tends to come out on top. And as your caller was saying, to ensure that you go to these home pages as well as social media is probably the least worst way of coping with this new ecosystem. The danger, I think, of just going to Facebook for your news, and this is pretty significant in Hong Kong, is that a lot of public figures now, politicians in particular, are just bypassing the media and going straight to Facebook. This is the first year I've seen press conferences live streamed by the people holding the press conferences, or even CY, or people putting up blog posts on their social media pages, and you don't get the sort of the context, the fact-checking that you would if you were, seeing this filtered through journalistic lenses.
Right, and politicians declaring their candidacy on using social media as well.
Or starting spats with China on Twitter. Yeah, God help us.
Well, when they started up in the United States having this television broadcast, people here wouldn't be familiar with it, but it's done by public funds, and it's called C-SPAN. and it just shows all kinds of things, whether it's proceedings of Congress or speeches by certain members or seminars or whatever, and a camera is set up and there's audio. And it's dead TV. I mean, it just shows you the person speaking and runs whatever they say for the length that they say it. And when this started up, people thought, who the hell is going to watch this? The answer is millions of people, because they liked watching something that was as it was happening. It wasn't edited. It wasn't filtered. They could draw their own opinion on it, and they could see it just as if they had a chair in the audience and were part of what was going on. And that should have been a message right there to somebody. But
that only gets you so far, doesn't it? And I mean, this whole thing has arisen really because people have claimed, and we can discuss whether it's true or not, that someone like Donald Trump doesn't care whether there is proof or whether what he's saying is right or wrong. I mean, is accurate, is a fact.
Well, I'm looking at,
and so you get all these fact checkers. So you get this plethora of organisations that are claiming to check facts during the debates and so on. And basically, America says we don't care. I couldn't care less whether you say that's a fact or not, or whether it's pants on fire or not. That makes no difference at all to my judgment when it comes to cast a vote. Is there anything new in that, or is that just?
Well, I mean, there's nothing new in populism. It's been around for a long time. Populism from the left and from the right.
Is it just people squealing about it because they're liberal media and they lost?
Or the other way around, that they were the right-wing media and they never won, in their view. So I mean, there's a kind of evening of scores that's going on out there someplace. But let's look at what happened, what you see on a lot of social media. I'm thinking particularly of Facebook. I get things from people all the time that are a picture of some movie star or some face with a slogan, or a green frog from Sesame Street, or something with a slogan placed over the front of it. Who's got the time to sit around and dream these things up? Who's got access to a database of images and can sit around, and you have to bounce these things off other people. There's never been a comedy show written by one person. It's a team of people and they bounce things back and forth, and funny things happen, and they write them down, and they end up being broadcast. Somebody is paying for this stuff. And it's a question that's been out there. If you were the New York Times, Washington Post, or some other well-funded news organization, you should have somebody out there investigating this question. Who produces this rubbish and affects public opinion and sticks it up? Some of it is funny, even if it's not your values. Some of it is funny, and it's meant to capture your attention. Some of it is straight out racist. Some of it is straight out sexist. It's all there, and you can data mine it. That's the thing people who are using this stuff don't realize, is that people who are skilled in data mining can gain huge amounts of information about the people who are responding to these various memes just by having them out there. So this is to somebody's benefit. It costs money. Somebody's making money on it. Who is it? And I think if we get to that question, we get closer to
money. I don't necessarily know that you're making money.
Well, there are individuals out there who've admitted it. There's interviews with people who've said, I get paid X amount of money for producing these things, and I made X numbers of thousands of dollars last year doing these things. And sometimes there are people who say, well, I personally don't believe what I do, but I get paid for it, so it's good for me. So, I mean, this takes time, this takes effort, this takes imagination, and that means somebody somewhere is paying money.
Okay.
It does happen. It has happened. There's a guy in a village in Macedonia who was making full stories about Hillary Clinton, and when you see the traffic that comes in on sensational stories like that, it occurs to someone, as Francis has said, and they're making ad revenue, ad dollars off of it.
This is the paedophile ring in the pizza parlour.
I haven't heard that one. Oh, yes. I know that was a more recent one that went viral. But yeah, I think that is relatively new. I think it feels new to me that people can, on video, be presented with the facts when it comes to the Trump-Hillary campaign. And they say it doesn't matter to them because they feel that it's not true, because there's a feeling that there are thousands of immigrants running over the border when it's closer to zero. I don't know what to do about that, because all our job is to present the facts, and if people can't accept it, where do you go from there?
I did see I looked at some of those reports about the paedophile ring in the pizza parlour, and they were truly frightening. They were truly mad people and a lot of mad people who are completely deluded.
Yes.
There's no other way to put it
Well, it's very
about
convincing
that.
fake news as well.
And it was really quite scary.
Well, the word of the year, I think, should be, if we want hyphenated words, is clickbait. I mean, that's what this is all about.
Okay, an email from Tom, thank you, who says, French philosopher Jean-François Lyotard's 1979 book on the postmodern condition is right on the money with regards to the postmodern era of information, or so-called truth generated from the current internet-based media and news nowadays. With regard to Trump winning the presidential election against the Frankfurt School, critical theorists on exile in the US in the 40s and 50s have already predicted the dominance of US social lives and the public discourse of the TV or media-based popular entertainment characters. Sometimes it's worth paying attention to the clever philosophers, says Tom. Thank you very much indeed for that. Is this just postmodern relativism, Professor?
Well, I've been thinking that throughout this broadcast and didn't dare mention it. You don't use words like Lyotard on radio. Yes, I think that clearly there is a sense in which the critique of Enlightenment rationality, if you like, to be pompous about it, has gained a popular currency. That the certainties that the doctor knows best, the certainties that science has the answers, has been challenged in a whole range of ways, and I think that has produced a degree of popular suspicion about authoritative narratives. Yes.
Okay. Maybe the cure is we start telling the truth consistently.
Well, it's a wider.
Luther?
It's a wide issue. It doesn't matter whether you're interested in cures for cancer and whether carrots can make you live longer or whatever. I mean, there's a whole world of things out there, and people who are trying to deal with let's say cancer, and who've had it and don't want to get it again, and are warning other people. These things just. They go, a picture of some poor kid and this alleged victim of some horrible disease, and it turns out it's none of those things, but people respond emotionally, and all of this stuff it's an assault. It's just a huge assault on all our senses and all our sensibilities as people. And I think that for example, the violation of sympathies, if I can call it that, is really bad because it's going to affect every legitimate call for assistance. It's going to reject every legitimate charity. People won't know to whom to give and whom not to give, and in what proportion, and are they being deceived? So I think it's a very confusing time for people in general, and how it's all going to sort out, I don't know. It seems like a big Tower of Babel at the moment, but in some way it will sort, and it may be by people creating whole new channels of information, aggregating information in some way, and people will respond to that the way they used to respond, by turning a dial on their television front or clicking a little thing in their hand that would change a channel and completely change your frame of mind with each click, and somehow we'll go that way.
Okay. Well, Francis, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Veteran journalist Francis Moriarty in our central studio there. Thank you to Professor Colin Sparks from the Department of Journalism at the Baptist University, and Tom Grundy, Editor-in-Chief of the Hong Kong Free Press. Thank you all very much indeed. 25 past 9, just want to turn finally today to Donald Trump and that phone call with President Tsai Ing-wen.